All right, so now that we know how we can study the brain, let's talk about what all of our studies have found, all of the brain structures. Now, I'm going to go through these pretty quick, so you're probably going to have to stop the video a few times and write things down. I also, before you take your mastery check, I would make yourself some flashcards so you can memorize these, because this is just memorization. I'm going to try and give you some tips and tricks along the way, but you're just going to have to memorize these structures. The human brain is awesome. It functions 24 hours a day from the day we're born, and it only stops when we're taking an exam or falling in love. Some scientists divide the brain up into three parts: hindbrain, midbrain, and forebrain. So we're going to kind of use that same general structure as we're talking about these things. The hindbrain is going to include it's what I call the reptile brain. It's the very basic bottom structures of the brain. It is right at the top of our spinal cord. So you can see right here, the spinal cord comes up and these structures are going to attach to it. All right, so we have the medulla oblongata right here. The pons is here. And the cerebellum is this big part back here. So the brain stem essentially is that hindbrain, plus it's going to have a thalamus and part of the midbrain. So it is the innermost region. It begins where the spinal cord swells slightly. That's where the medulla is. So here's the spinal cord. Then you can see the swelling right here after it enters the cell. And then you have your pons, your midbrain, your thalamus. It controls automatic survival functions, okay? The brainstem is a crossover point where most nerves to and from each side of the brain connect with the body's opposite side, okay? So this is interesting because your right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, and the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So this is where things cross over in your brain. So let's talk about first the medulla oblongata. It regulates your heart rate, breathing rate, blood pressure. So these are things you don't have to think about. You're not thinking about your heart rate right now. Well, now you are because I mentioned it, but before you weren't, right? Your blood pressure, you're not saying, okay, blood pressure be 98.6, and it does it. That's not how it does. Pons connects the hindbrain, midbrain, and forebrain together. We use it for facial expressions. It is a relay station. It acts like sort of a train station to relay messages. It also helps control our sleep. Now the cerebellum, that back little that back little ball on the back of the brain there, cerebellum actually means little brain, and it coordinates movement and balance. The midbrain coordinates simple movements with sensory information, and it contains the reticular formation. So what the heck is that? The reticular formation is actually inside the midbrain. You can see right there. And it affects consciousness and arousal. Basically, like consciousness is what you're aware of in the world. And arousal is like being awake. So if you take any type of sleep medication, it is going to affect this part of the brain, because this part of the brain is going to be what helps us stay awake or and be conscious out there in the world, right? It's important. If there is damage, then you can end up to an irreversible coma. And it looks like a finger that is located inside the brainstem. All right, the forebrain is the largest part of the brain, and it is what makes us human. Remember we said that I thought that the hindbrain was like the reptile brain because that's like just basic life functions, right? The forebrain is actually what's going to make us human. It's made up of the thalamus, the limbic system, and the cerebral cortex. The thalamus is a relay station for sensory information. So sensory information is going to come into the thalamus, and the thalamus is going to kind of direct it and tell it where to go within the forebrain, like a switchboard. But smell goes through a different place. Smell is actually going to go directly to the limbic system. So smell goes actually directly to the limbic system. It is the emotional control center of the brain. It's made up of the hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. The hypothalamus is pea-sized in the brain, but has a huge role. It regulates body temperature, hunger, thirst, libido, and your endocrine system, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It controls the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland is your master gland in the endocrine system. And the hypothalamus actually controls that gland. The hippocampus is involved in memory processing. And it actually is named because for seahorse, hippo is actually like a seahorse thing. And it's supposed to look like a seahorse. And the amygdala is vital for basic emotions, okay? So this isn't complicated emotions. This is like anger. This is like happy, like very basic emotions. Mostly, however, aggression, fear, and anger. That's your amygdala. So amygdala is aggression, fear, and anger, okay? So as we talk about your forebrain, we're going to move into the cerebral cortex, and we're going to discover that your cerebral cortex is what can override some of this fear, aggression, and anger from the amygdala, okay?